This over to Christian, just thank you for your prayers. Your prayers are the most important thing. That's what opens up everything, is the prayers.
Okay, like you said, my name is Christian Osburn. I'm now the president of Churches for the Nations. And I just wanted to thank you, Ken, for having us out here again. We appreciate you and our relationship with you. And just like my dad said, we both got our Bible degrees through. At the time, he was hosting a Life Christian University campus there at our church in Oakton. And so, I mean, I am forever grateful to Ken, for all those. I mean, it was years that we were there together doing this, and we just, grew. When you're in a Bible school, I'm sure many of you guys have done Bible class and things like. The thing that I really like about the way Ken was teaching was it wasn't just like dry theology, like blah 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 blah. He really put a lot of spirit and life into it. And not only is it good, to get the degree and all that stuff, but it's just you were drawing closer to God with every class. So we are just forever indebted to you, Ken, and thank you very much. But I got a little PowerPoint here. And so what is Churches for the Nations? Well, I wonder if you can guess from our name, all right? Churches for the Nations. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. Our vision is, our primary vision, like my father said, is planting churches where no churches exist. And our primary focus is in developing countries, like third world countries, in rural areas where there's literally no church presence at all. That's kind of our heart, You can go ahead and go to the next slide. Churches for the Nations is a ministry devoted to working alongside proven ministries to help provide funding for the building of churches, schools, needy children homes, clean water wells, and to raise monthly support for pastors, widows, and needy children in developing countries. And just to be clear, we don't physically go anywhere and physically build countries. Our focus is on raising the funds and then partnering with ministries that are already on ground in these locations. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just want to partner with people that are already doing God's work and help fund them so that they can be released to continue God's kingdom expansion in these different areas. And one of the primary reasons that we don't do that ourselves is we have found that there is a huge cost difference in a lot of these areas when it comes to the local price and the American price. Like my dad said, a lot of these churches average about $7,500. I mean, you can't do anything with $7,500 here in the U.S., but if they know the money is coming from America, that it goes up quick. It'll be $40,000. So we try to stay unseen, and we work through the locals that are there to kind of keep the prices down. You can go ahead to the next slide. And again, so we do this by overseeing and coordinating the donations for, like I said, the building of primarily churches, but also schools, the funding, the building of children's homes, the building of clean water wells, and again, to support the native pastors, the needy children, for widows, and for native Bible training, and whatever the ministry's greatest needs. Although we focus primarily on these things, sometimes there'll be like a special need a particular ministry has, and we'll try to help meet whatever that need might be. You can go ahead to the next slide. So this is just a snapshot from our website. Our ministry, in essence, is pretty simple. It's not like a complicated thing. There's just a few things that we focus on doing. Again, building churches, building children's homes. Now, the support for pastors. Now, here, especially in this area, you got to make like $100,000. It seems like a household income just to be living, paycheck to paycheck. But a lot of these places overseas, like in India and in Africa, and these rural areas we're focusing on, $50 to $100 a month goes a long way. And so to us, that's like we spend that on Starbucks in like a week, but over there, that could support a family for an entire month. So it's a big deal. It's small for us, but it's a big deal for them. The children's programs, we don't call it orphanages because some of the children are not orphans. Sometimes it's just parents that they can't afford food for their children or clothing or schooling and things like that. So they're not all necessarily orphans. That's why we use the word children's program or needy children. Same deal. We're looking to raise about $50 to $100 a month to help these kids. That covers their school supplies, their food, their clothing, medical expenses, and things like that. Clean water wells. It depends on the area, but typically we can have one built for about $1,500, and that's, of course, the local price. Here in America, it's about, if it's an easy dig, you're talking about $10,000, for an easy well. If it's complicated, it could be $20,000 or beyond. So it's a pretty good deal when you're talking about what you get for your money. We also like to help raise support for widows, because God has called us to do that. And we also like to raise support to train native Bible workers in these different countries. We kind of feel like that God uses the people that are there, that they know the culture. They know the people better than we do. And so we'd like to empower them to reach their people. And a lot of these countries, they lack good, solid Bible teaching. I mean, I could tell you stories that would just make your hair curl, things that people believe and that are teaching under the name of Jesus that are just so contrary to the Word of God. So it's so important to help these people that just can't afford it. They can't afford to just go to Bible school. So we try to help supply that. You can go ahead to the next slide. We are committed to advancing God's kingdom. Like my sisters here said, the number one goal is ministering to the soul. Our number one goal is for the people to get saved, filled with God's Spirit, and to then put forth the kingdom of God. And all these things are just tools to bring God's kingdom to these people. There's a lot of charities out there that are doing a lot of great things, like secular charities, but at the end of the day, what good is water if you're going to go to hell? What good is housing and clothes if you're going to go to hell? So our number one focus is Jesus, getting the gospel out there. And these are all just tools to help people be empowered so they can bring the gospel to these people. So Churches for the Nations desires to participate in the building of the kingdom of Jesus Christ by building churches where no churches exist and by supporting native Christian leaders so they can meet the needs of the people. We believe strongly in partnership, not only with the people and ministries we are striving to assist in other countries, but with believers who are able to become a vital part of this partnership through their prayers and support. You can go to the next slide. So it all began right here in South India in 2002. My dad and I was actually taking the picture, so that's why I'm not in the picture. That was before selfies were popular, okay? So I didn't do a selfie. So it was my dad and I's first mission trip, our first time in a third world country like this. And God just really, broke my dad's heart when he saw the need in these areas. And at the time, we visited both South and North India, and the need is so great there. So this is where it all began, right there in 2002 in India, where God birthed this in my dad's heart. He saw the need for these churches to be supported and planted, and so that's why we do what we do today. You can go ahead to the next slide. Okay, so right now we're going to show the status of our year-to-date and current and ongoing projects. You can go to the next slide. So so year to date from 2002, that time until now, we've built a total of 66 churches. As you can see, primarily in India, so 57 in India, 6 in Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa, 1 in Swaziland, 1 in Ethiopia, and then 1 that we just did in the Philippines. That's actually currently under construction. You can go to the next slide. And these are I just kind of put a couple examples of what the churches look like just to kind of give you an idea. You can go ahead to the next slide. And that first church was the church in India. Here's another one in India. This one is in... It might have been. It could have been. This is one that's in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And that's just some children. So when you, in our minds, we don't really think so much a church, a building as a big deal because we're so used to it. There's a church on every corner. But when you go to these rural areas, a lot of times there's nothing there. There's no police departments, there's no schools, there's nothing. So a building like as simple as this may seem, it changes the entire village or community. A lot of times, they're not only are they churches, but they just become all sorts of different things. They're like they use them all day long. It's not like, okay, we did all this and they use it, on Sunday mornings. They're using it all week long. They use them for medical outreaches. They use them for school during the week. They use them for Bible schools to raise up Bible students. I mean, they become like an outreach center in the entire village. I mean, they change the entire place. You can go ahead to the next slide. There's another one that was being constructed. It's now finished, also in West Africa. This one was both a church and a needy children's home. You can go to the next one. So this is just like a typical church, just to kind of give you an idea. And they vary, They kind of just like here. Sometimes it makes more sense to make them wider and thinner and this and that. So this is just like your average one. This is 40 feet long and 25 feet wide. Some of them, that's all it is. And some of them, they'll have like a little space in the back for the pastor to kind of live there, or sometimes there'll be like a little room where they can do like medical things. So it just kind of depends on the area and what they can do. You can go to the next slide. And I'm just going to kind of show you a couple outreach photos. You can go to the next one. So one of the things that we do also is to make sure that the money is being used. We don't want to go over there and we bought a guy a Mercedes-Benz or something like that, And believe me, there is just like Pastor Ken said, there's so much of that out there. As soon as you have a ministry, everyone, we probably get 2 or 3 emails a week, somebody asking for money overseas. And, like my dad said, the need is endless. There's so many needs out there and many legitimate needs out there. But we're not just going to send money to some guy who sent us an email, from Ghana or whatever. So we typically partner with people that we already have a relationship with or that God kind of introduces us to. But we do our due diligence and we take mission trips and we go to make sure that the money is being used like it's supposed to be. And so this was a trip that my dad was talking about. He went to Vietnam. This is one of the Bible school graduations there in Vietnam. You can go to the next picture. This is my dad in a needy children's home in Sierra Leone, and he was just paying a visit and kind of handing them out some candy and stuff. You can go to the next photo, and there's my dad again still in Sierra Leone at that needy children's home. And this is an evangelism outreach that we did in Sierra Leone. And that's another thing that we do when we go to these different places. And I don't know how many of you have been, on a mission trip to another country. But like a lot of countries, they think of America as a Christian nation. I know we're kind of like, really? But a lot of the countries, they really think, so when a Christian comes from America to visit, I mean, they look at you like you're Benny Hinn. They're like, everyone comes. Here that doesn't do anything. You go, oh, hey, Christian Osburn is going to be speaking. No one's going to show up to that. You go there and say an American is coming. Everybody comes. I'm not talking just Christians. You got Muslims. The whole village shows up. They want to know what this American guy has got to say. So we capitalize on that opportunity. So while we're there, we'll have evangelism outreaches and try to get people saved. And so we also raise funding for that. You can do an outreach, on average for about $1,000 and reach 1,000 people. It's about $1 a person to do an outreach. And that includes like the stage and sound equipment and stuff like that. You can go to the next picture. This was at a pastor's conference in India. We were just handing out some Bibles there. And same thing with this one. So that's the other thing we do is when we go just to kind of look around. A lot of times while we're there, we'll kind of not only organize evangelism outreaches, but we'll organize pastors' conferences. And again, these are places where there's extreme poverty. Some of these pastors, they may be in pastor for 10 years, and they don't even own their own Bible. They maybe have a couple pages that they were sharing. They ripped out of a Bible with some other pastors that they're sharing. So to us, we think I probably have 50 Bibles at my house. And then on my cell phone, I got 200 translations, But in a lot of these places, they don't have anything. They, a simple Bible that we wouldn't even look at here, We got all these fancy Bibles, or just like I said, I use my iPad nowadays. But it's a really big deal. You can go to the next one. This is a baptism service in India, and again, our primary focus is on getting people saved and getting people to heaven, to grasp people out of the hands of the enemy and out of his snare and into the hands of God. In this part of India, there's a lot of persecution there in North India. So we cannot physically baptize people ourselves. It would be illegal for us to do that there in this particular part. So that's why the natives pastors there, they have to do their own baptisms. You can go to the next one. And so that's just what my dad was mentioning. That's Alpha Ministries. That's just one of the ministries we support. So they've been over there in India doing this for 55 years. We're not going to go over in India and try to reinvent the wheel, but we'd like to fund them, to empower them to continue advancing God's kingdom. And on that note, this is a new ministry that we just started supporting. His name is, his family is there. It's Michael Bailey. He's a missionary with Fire International in the Philippines. And we just partnered with him to build a new church there in a rural area of Philippines. You can go ahead and do the next photo. Or, I'm sorry, next slide. Just a little bit about their ministry. Mike and his wife, Jeanette Bailey, have served in the Philippines since 2003. Since that time, they have ministered and worked alongside many missionaries, ministries, and churches. They have been a part of church plants, ministry schools, education for the youth, evangelistic crusades, outreaches, feeding the malnourished, and disaster relief. You can go to the next slide. They have done extensive work among the poor, including construction of housing, drinking water, development, and livelihood projects. In 2010, the Bailey family and the team of missionaries and nationals began to pioneer hope for all children in the island, I don't know if I'm saying this right, of Samal. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Through Hope for All Children, they continue to feed malnourished children, take in orphans, and continue the fight against human trafficking. And if just for more about their ministry, you can visit their website. It's hopeforallchildren.org. You can go to the next slide. And so a lot of these connections that we get with different ministries, it's just we kind of let God kind of make the connections. God will kind of lead us to people, and it'll seem like the right fit, and we just kind of go along with that. And this guy, Mike Bailey, he actually came out to our church when we used to go to the church in Oakton, probably about 8 years ago. And I remember when I shook his hand, it was like I knew we were going to have some kind of connection, you know? And I'm looking at his face, and like he knew too. We both knew. Like it was like one of those moments that you had in the spirit. You're like, okay, God's going to do something here. He gave me his business card. Didn't do anything with him for almost 8 years. I kept his business card in my little business card carrier. And then finally the opportunity came up where we had some funds, and God put him on my heart, and I contacted him. And so they're primarily focused there in the Philippines as they work with a lot of the sex trafficking victims there. I mean, it's a huge problem there in the Philippines, you know, the young people and things like that. So that's kind of their primary goal. But through being there for as long as they have been, they've developed a lot of relationships with the different pastors and ministries that are there. So he's like, I know a pastor right now that really needs a church. He's out in a rural area, so like this would just be perfect. And so we felt led, and so we supplied the money. And he just sent me these photos probably about a month ago of this church in progress.
Yeah,
you go to the next, like my dad said, they're pretty solid. They're mostly usually just straight up concrete, you know, a block and concrete. And some of them, they're actually made of dung, depending on where the area is, but they're pretty strong, a lot of these buildings. And like my dad say, we typically don't pay for the land. The church usually will have to put that up front, so they do have skin in the game, you know, and they do their part. You can go ahead to the next photo. I'm sorry, next slide. Okay, and this is just a little thing he sent me. He said, when finished, it will have a little kitchen area with a sink and a countertop for cooking. It will have a small restroom with a small shower. Above the stage area will be a room for the single pastor to live. The small congregation is super blessed already and are excited to have a dedication service once it's complete. So, I mean, this is just, again, we may never meet some of these people, not until we get to heaven. But, you know, again, it's like God sees the people, the lives that it's impacting, and how it just, like I said, it just changes not only the congregation, but the whole area. And like I already said, the accountability. Churches for the Nations keeps in communication with the project leaders to ensure timely project status and eventual completion. Churches for the Nations travels on mission trips to monitor projects and also check the feasibility of other projects. You can go to the next slide. So, like my old pastor used to say, all right, we're all called to the Great Commission. Every single one. A lot of us sitting here like, well, I'm not an evangelist. We're still all called to do our part. You might not be called to go move to Africa or India, and be a missionary, but you can do your part. And there's 3 very practical ways that we can all do our part. And that is we can all pray. There's nobody in here that can't pray. You can pay or you can go. And so some of us can do all 3 of those. Some of us can only do 2, but all of us can do at least one of those. All right, so we just ask and pray that you would consider becoming a partner with Churches for the Nations. You can go to the next slide. And this is just our website if you want more information about our ministry or just to kind of get more details and things like that, or make a donation. You saw there, like I said, the website is really simple, real easy to navigate. It's just churchesforthenations.org. And just one last thing I want to mention to you. Like my dad said, a typical church in these areas, it's about $7,500. And I know most of us don't have $7,500 lying around that we can just go spend, or our tithe is usually, if your tithe is $7,500 a month, you're doing pretty good. But most of us, that's not very practical. So we've kind of made other practical ways that most of us can help, do. And we got these little pamphlets you'll see back there. We have 2 different things that we kind of developed, 2 different little clubs. One's called the 1% Club. And our kind of goal is to get 100 people that are giving $100 a month. And that will raise about $120,000 a year. So $100 a month, that's more manageable, that's more reasonable. But if we got 100 people doing that, that's $120,000 a year, and that's huge in these areas. We also have something that's even if you got an even tighter budget, something that might be even a little more practical, is we have a thing called the Quarter Club, which is $25 a month. And like I was saying, that takes care of the monthly support for like pastors and widows and needy children. We try to focus on at least about $50, so $25 would be to cover half of that cost. So even that would be a huge blessing. But I just wanted to thank everybody for your time, and thank you again, Ken, for having us.